What if I told you, despite everything that has happened in the anime community and as time has progressed and years have gone by, this three-way deadlock of Naruto, Ichigo, and Luffy about who is the strongest will never cease to exist due to simply the fact that there are people who never want to concede the smallest bit of points in relation to these discussions, and thus this will forever be a three-way deadlock. And let's get into it. Now, I want you to really think about the sheer level of data and information we have on all three of these series. One Piece, still actively going on. But when it comes to Naruto and Bleach, I'm not counting Thousand Year Blood War arc as continuing, we already know the manga finish. But into those two stories, over 20 years of information has come out. 20 years of data books, feats, animations, etc., definitions, however you want to slice it. And we still have people who will not concede certain levels of inconsistencies or straight up facts in any of their series. Let's go to Naruto, probably the most debated one out of all the three. Naruto as a verse fundamentally is a system of skill over power, meaning that if you are the more skilled ninja, you will win against someone through sheer power. A textbook example of that is probably not what you would think I would use, and it's Gaara versus Rock Lee. Lee, at that point, using the gates, was a stronger ninja in terms of power in relation to fighting Gaara, who is a Jinchuriki, who we know with the tail beast was a degree of power in that title. But Gaara, being someone who actually could use ninjutsu compared to someone who can't use ninjutsu, ultimately won that fight because the difference wasn't about power, the difference was skill. And another example is how Naruto at 12 years old with Kurama and that power would not be stronger than Kakashi until halfway through Shippuden when he developed more skills. That is a fundamental understanding of how Naruto works as a universe. Therefore, when you look at their jutsus and how well one can do against other people, it comes down to information. Because again, the series showcases this very well in multiple fights where one character loses against another, and the second character with the new information of how to fight the old character ends up winning that battle. Naruto would lose the battle against Pain had Jiraiya not sacrificed himself in order to get information he needed to figure out that there were 6 Pains and how their connectivity works. And even then, he still needed the aid of Ma and Pa, who were there with Jiraiya to help win that fight. Then you go over into Asuma fighting Hidan and Kakazu with the other Jonin, which aided Team 10's effort in fighting them later, because had they not known how Hidan's jutsu work and the dangers that it poses, it would have not allowed them to create the strategy to counterplay it. That's the idea of Naruto. Strategy trumps power all the time. But because of that, people outside the Naruto verse wouldn't know the potency behind most techniques or the subtleties of being a ninja. Therefore, a lot of jutsus in Naruto would just one-shot a lot of people outside of the verses, and they're not willing to accept that. As stated by Hagoromo, when Kaguya came to Earth and gave everyone access to chakra, and also put them under the infinite Tsukuyomi when they didn't possess it, that shows that Genjutsu could work on anybody, which leads to one of the biggest arguments from people with Naruto side versus non-Naruto fans is that Genjutsu works on everyone because it already showcased like people who don't even have chakra naturally. So end that point. Now we can move on to Bleach and its levels of inconsistencies. Now, when it comes to that, Aizen being the de facto main character of the show also highlights the fact that he was very much unable or unwilling to use his Shikai on the main character, despite multiple times the main character either thwarting his plans, quote, being part of the plan, but also when he started putting his belt to ass on Aizen during the end of that arc. So, you're trying to tell me that the smartest guy in the room couldn't make the conscious decision to use his best ability against the one guy who seemed to be able to harm him? That just doesn't fly. And on top of that, in that same arc, you had the time where Momo was getting jumped, and Ichigo, who's not under the effects of Kyoku Sugetsu, was just standing around doing nothing. These are just so many other small tidbits that comes to the Bleach series where you're like, it just doesn't make any sense. Like, you have to actually stop and think about it. It just doesn't make sense, or we're just kind of like plot armor the show. And where I'll give Bleach the credit is that when it comes to character design and power designs, they are very unique in some of how the Shikais and Bankais work, and to the extent to which they can cause damage, especially with Thousand Year Blood War arc expanding Squad Zero's abilities. Now, as a result of that, in the Bleach verse, your stature in terms of the verse is based on your spiritual pressure, based on the power you wield. Well, titles aren't as big of a thing in this show because Captain, Lieutenant, Squad Zero, these parts really don't matter. It's really just about your spiritual pressure. Because ultimately, as Eisen showed, if you were at a higher spiritual level than another being, then even their hacks will work on you, which is causes one of the biggest contentions between the two shows of Naruto and Bleach, because all the hacks in Naruto are extremely potent, if not one-shot worthy, and people in Bleach will say, well, they scale above you, so it doesn't work. This is one of those things that just will never cease to not be an argument, because ultimately you have to try to convince a Bleach fan that their rules of a universe don't apply in a death battle when we're not in the given universe. That's just ultimately where we're going to always be stuck in that battle. And now let's go to the One Piece side. One Piece as a show is more focused on the journey and the aspects of world building, which is Oda's greatest strength. He is a master at building a world and making it feel lived in, and having all different kinds of cultures and personalities, even character models. And I'll never take that away from him. I always give him the credit in that regard. But in terms of like his storytelling, I've said this. The story seems independent of the Straw Hats. Like, the world and everything is happening outside of what the Straw Hats actually influence to be, and are not always the driving force. But on another note, as a buddy of mine said not too long ago when we're talking about this, Oda has a tendency to forsake power scaling for storytelling. And what I mean by that is, we see so many times in the show where characters who should be, quote, faster than light, or faster than lightning, are just getting clipped and hit by things that move maybe slower than a musket. The inconsistency in the speed scaling of One Piece leads to a lot of times why it gets little broed by Naruto and Bleach, because those characters are canonically and shown to be faster than light, lightning, etc. multiple times over, with multiple consistencies showing that. Well, we have characters who are like made of light, along with other characters made of lightning, and are still getting hit and speed blitz by other characters who have not shown any level of speed. So therefore it leads to the kind of issue of like, how do you make these a well-oiled machine? How do you make this an actual competition if the other characters are all faster than you? And that's the thing about comes to One Piece and their powers, is that Luffy's kind of, trump card is the fact that he can turn anything into rubber that he comes in contact with. He does not have true Toon Force because he cannot change the sky. He cannot pull pages out off the screen. He cannot do any Bugs Bunny stuff. All he can do is make anything he comes in contact with physically rubber-like. Lightning, clouds, ground, even people he's putting his hands on. Even light, he turns or bends holograms. All these things are consistent in what their abilities do. And I'll say that for One Piece. Every ability in One Piece is super consistent in what it does and how it works. There's not simply an Oda problem. A lot of mangakas don't really actually think about the power scaling or the sheer science behind some of the things they have their characters do, because ultimately these are cartoons. But others have taken the time to really dedicate to how this will actually look. Kishimoto has been quoted multiple times that when it comes to the Naruto Storm games, when it comes to their supers, those are depicting what those characters would really be able to do given their strength of power, which was not animated for various reasons, because if you look at the animation of some of these supers, there would be a lot of terraforming on the world of Naruto. The supers work the way they're illustrated. So ultimately, we have shown multiple levels of consistency in one of the mangakas versus the other. And then Kubo ultimately just shows that he was not willing to put Ichigo under Aizen's ability, despite it being the most logical thing to do. So, what did I just showcase? I showcased that, well, all the series have defined abilities, powers, quirks, etc., and how their worlds work. When in comparing them to each other, there's a lot of things we have to kind of give and take. But when it comes to One Piece and Bleach in regards to that, One Piece fans have to understand that their speed scaling is super inconsistent, and therefore people are always going to downplay the in relation to their speed, because there's only one character made of light, and that's Kizaru, and considering that we see him doing things and what he struggles with, we can easily say anyone who struggles or makes him struggle, per se, would be faster than light, because he is made of light. Versus other characters who are not made of light, who are still getting like hit with muskets and other kind of slower objects in comparison. While Bleach, we have consistent speed scaling on that verse, and showcase some of the more fastest characters who consistently, despite changes and power gaps, are still the fastest. Soifon and Yoriichi are still the fastest characters in that verse, all the way to 1,000 Year Blood War arc, because that's consistency. And then in Naruto, all the abilities in Naruto don't have a yeah, but they always do the thing they're supposed to do if you get hit with them. The only times they don't work is when you don't get hit. That's the premise of the show. Then just try not to get hit. The ultimate thing about Naruto is all about dodging and outmaneuvering your opponent mentally. Set them up to get hit with those techniques that are one-shotters. Because I told you, I'm going to make a video one day of the list of things in Naruto that you would not survive if you got hit by them. And I know, like, you made this part of the video, you might think I'm just, like, going to be a Naruto stan, Naruto homer, yada yada. I could be that. I could have preferences to Naruto as a series compared to One Piece and Bleach. But it doesn't mean I'm going to take away from what Bleach and One Piece can do. I'm just putting them into the context of what their own show has shown, what their own show has said. And when you tell me that somehow my show, what it said, is wrong, but yours is right, that just removes any ability to have a true discussion. Ultimately speaking, these three will never settle who's the strongest. Because all the Bleach fans will say, will he be a human? A human who absorbed the Soul King, and suddenly now that human's on, like, some kind of, like, universal level, despite doing really nothing with it. And then also that same person who could see the future couldn't see a way that he was being tricked by Aizen the entire time. Like, there's just so many things that just happen. These things happen in the show. These things happen in the story. And there's nothing that can arrange that. Or the fact that in One Piece, Kaido, for how fast and strong he was as a Yonko, couldn't dodge lightning. Like, Luffy literally took the time to grab a bolt of lightning and slam Kaido with it. And somehow, being faster than light, he couldn't dodge that. There's just so many inconsistencies with their power scaling or just their storytelling. Until Kishimoto, you give him a lot of flack. Could not draw characters right. Could not tell women. Couldn't find a way to figure out how to get rid of Madara. There's multiple things that he did not do perfectly. But in relation to this battle, these three fighting each other, ultimately will never get a victor because no one wants to concede to their flaws. I'll concede to Naruto's flaws. I've said it multiple times in multiple videos. But until you're willing to concede the flaws of Bleach and One Piece, this three-way deadlock will never end. GG's, guys.
Stop what you're doing and listen.